Before we get started with this episode, I wanted to give you some exciting news that the first Wednesday of every month, there will be an introductory session presented by me for the Creighton model system, which is a system of fertility charting. This introductory session, you will leave knowing the basics of knowing how to chart your cycle, and you will learn so much about your reproductive anatomy, hormones, physiology, all the things. So many times I give this presentation to women and to couples, and they always say, why have I never known this information before? So if you are interested in signing up for this introductory session, it is just $50 to get started with this session. From there, we'll do some one-on-one coaching, get you really locked and loaded with knowing how to chart your cycle and becoming so much more empowered from there. Visit truthandfertility.com to sign up. Welcome to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. I'm Haley, wife, mom, and a fertility charting instructor, here to teach you the undeniable truth about your fertility. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Rita Johnson. She is the founder of Divine Mercy Nutritional Care. So yes, we are going to be talking about all things nutrition today. She is also a Creighton FertilityCare Practitioner. So she teaches us the Creighton method just as I do. So we have that in common already. So we're going to probably, I would assume, be using a lot of that language with the Creighton method and how we can use that for women's health and their and just making sure that their fertility is healthy as it can be, but also specifically how nutrition plays a role in that. And I know even personally, I've kind of been on a journey of trying to clean up the things that I eat, but it's really hard when you don't have somebody to kind of walk you through what is healthy, what is not, but also I was just telling Rita before we started recording, sometimes you can also get into a rabbit hole of going a little bit too far where it's not even sustainable anymore. And then you just give up because it's so hard. And then you just go back to eating McDonald's, right? So I want to talk to Rita today just to kind of pick her brain on how we as women especially can eat healthier, have a healthier hormones, healthier fertility, and how nutrition plays a role in that. So Rita, welcome to the show. If you wouldn't mind just telling us all about you, about Divine Mercy Nutritional Care, and then just going for it.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. I'm Rita Johnson. I started Divine Mercy Nutritional Care about 4 years ago, and I got trained as a Creighton FertilityCare Practitioner about 10 and a half years ago. I went to my EP1. So I live in the Cincinnati area with my 6 kiddos and my husband, and we homeschool as well. And we have a very busy household, as you can imagine, with all of that. And so I love being able to bring that perspective into my nutrition business, because it's not just about, as much as it's not just about what's going on our plates, it's also not just about eating for perfection, like having this high goal that's unattainable. We all have different things on our plates at different seasons, and we're able to do that, better or worse at different times. And so really just figuring out what it is that is our body's non-negotiables and how we can support it and then move forward from there. Right. So that's what I'm passionate about. And I'm so excited to be here today and talk to you all.
Yes. And I love that you homeschool. We just started homeschooling my 5-year-old, who's our oldest. And I mean, it's kindergarten. The stakes are low, but it's been a journey for sure. So that's great. Okay. So what I'm hearing right now is that, it doesn't just matter what's on, like generally what our nutrition looks like. It's very personalized to what our body can take. So can you kind of walk through, like, when you're starting to meet with somebody and working with them about, and helping them just eat healthier, have better nutrition, especially I'm assuming that you're working with women, especially for the sake of their fertility and helping them just have a healthier fertility. Kind of walk me through what that process looks like, how they are able to kind of understand, and on a personal level, what is best for them to eat.
Yeah, for sure. So I always start with a deep dive because it is really important to figure out, like, what are your most obvious symptoms? Someone might come to me because they're like, my hormones are off, but the reality is that is not a root cause. Hormones being imbalanced is not a root cause. And so we can't just say, I don't have enough progesterone. What can I do to support my progesterone? We need to dig deeper than that. So that is more of a surface answer. And truly, this is why I got into this work, because I did get frustrated feeling like all we were doing in NAPRA protocols was giving progesterone, and that's not all that is done. But it just felt frustrating to me when I had clients that were like, but I want more, or I want to know why I'm not making enough progesterone. And I didn't have solutions. I didn't have things I could help them with. And so getting into the NTP realm, I realized it's because it's so dependent on everything else. And so that's why when I start working with somebody one-on-one, we do a deep dive. We do a 90-minute consult where we're deep diving into signs, symptoms, things that you didn't even realize are also telling us a part of the story of how your body needs to be supported. It's really common that I'll hear women say things like, but I feel like this and this and this kind of all started at the same time. But what they don't realize is that we can even go deeper than that and more nuanced than that, because our hormones are so dependent on other systems of our body. So in that 90-minute deep dive, we're talking about health history. We're talking about those symptom presentation. We are talking about what they're eating in a typical 3 days. But it really is going deeper than that too, because we want to see where is there dysfunction that needs to be supported. Sometimes it's somebody that's eating so perfect, but so stressed out about what they're putting on their plates that high stress level is actually negatively impacting their hormones, right? Sometimes it's somebody that's trying to conceive and they're so desiring a conception so bad that they're stressing themselves out about every little thing, right? Whether that's like, is this lubricative or not? Or I skipped one observation in a day, or, these little things. And then it starts to spill over into everything else. And there's this, understandably, this deep desire to control, right? And it's really easy to control and manipulate what's on our plates. And that's where a lot of times when we have these high stressors, things like eating disorders or dysregulated relationship with food starts to come out. And so sometimes it's balancing that, right? Sometimes it's not so much like, oh, let's nitpick what you're eating. It's more of like, let's just take a step back. Let's just realize that, like, look, if you eat some potato chips sometimes, it's not going to be the end of the world. Like, we need to really balance these things. And so that's kind of how I go about like figuring out like the person in front of me, what is going to be the most supportive thing for them to do. And then it's figuring out like, are there other things that, we have been able to identify before? Are there inflammatory factors of like things that you're eating that are causing inflammation? Or is there some type of GI inflammation that we need to really get to the root cause of? And so we might do something like GI stool map, or, diving deeper into gut health to see if there's some cofactors there that are contributing to inflammation. And I will say this is huge with women with endo. Right? Women that have inflammatory diseases, we need to really go inflammation hunting and see what can we do to calm down inflammation, because there is such a high amount of inflammatory processes happening with endometriosis. So that's kind of some of the steps that we take, but I'm always ultimately thinking like, how can I help you to understand how your body needs to be supported so you no longer need me? So you instead are able to learn and listen from your body and know what steps you need to take to support it.
Okay, I have so many questions from that because that was so good. Okay, well, let's start with what you said earlier about progesterone, because this is something that's been coming up so much for me too, in that when you're having some sort of hormonal imbalance, I would say a really common one, especially as Creighton Fertility Care Practitioners, where we're looking at charts, a common one that I see is low progesterone. And that can be seen very visibly on a fertility chart too. And so that's probably why we see it a lot. But that you're right, that it really is, it's not just the progesterone deficiency, it's what is causing that progesterone deficiency, and then how can we move from there. And so when you're working with a woman who maybe she's already charting, maybe we're noticing some signs of hormonal imbalances there on the chart, we have like the NAPRO technology route of like, okay, let's get you set up with the right doctor to figure out, get a proper diagnosis that would lead to a proper treatment. So we have that route. And then what I'm hearing though is that we also have a route of, let's look and see what your diet is. Let's look and see what type of supplements you're taking. Let's look and see how much stress you have. It's so funny you talk about stress, because just actually in the very last episode of this podcast, I was talking to the guest about how actually when my husband and I were trying to conceive our 5-year-old, I was so stressed about it. And it wasn't until I let go of control, even just like the teeny tiny bit of just surrender of that, literally like 2 weeks later, we got pregnant. So stress is so involved in that too. So, okay. But when you're going the route of nutrition though, do you see that really truly does make that huge shift that women need to really help those hormones balance again? Like, I guess my question is, what is the difference, or what are the pros and cons of going maybe like I say the traditional NAPRO route. That's not even the traditional route at all, but the NAPRO technology route of seeking a doctor versus, going the nutritional route and trying to eat healthier. Like, what do you see the difference of those two things being?
Yeah, so I definitely think that like first of all, these approaches can be combined, right? So you can do both at the same time, and I would actually argue that you should, if you were doing like NAPRO, and whether you're getting, bioidentical progesterone with your cycles or whatever it is, you should also be diving deeper into what can I do with my, we talk about like this holistic nutrition. It's holistic approach. It's mind, body, and soul. So what else is it that is preventing my body from making these hormones naturally? So medication is not necessarily something that we need to avoid. There are people that are like, I'd rather not take the medication until I absolutely really have to. And so they might start just working with somebody like me and then eventually try NAPRO if that is still needed for them. But I would also say to the people that just jump right into NAPRO, like jump right into another support as well, because they work very well together. If we're needing to look at how, for example, like how you're metabolizing your food to be able to absorb your nutrients, like your healthy fats and your vitamins and minerals, so that you can make your own hormones, that's going to be a very necessary thing to do at the same time as taking a medication that's helping to balance your hormones so you feel good, it as that like bridge in between, right? So it's kind of like, I actually like to think of it as this like in between space where I really like to work. And that sometimes it's at the place where we don't feel good, but our labs look fine. And sometimes we're at this place where like our labs don't look good and we don't feel good. And whether we're struggling because we're trying to conceive, or we're struggling because our hormones are imbalanced, and there's a whole host of side effects from that, right? It's really important to take this combined approach. So is it enough? That really depends on what is the problem to begin with. I would say that, the vast majority of the time, when you're really taking this all-encompassing approach, you are going to feel better in the process because we're diving deeper. We're looking more at like, where is the dysfunction? How can I support my body in this process? Truly, too, this is why I got into this. So I have been teaching fertility care. We had 4 kiddos in 7 years, and then we had several things happen. We moved 3 states away. We all this stuff, all this life changes. And we got to the 2-year window, right? When you're like, okay, I'm usually pregnant by now. And it wasn't happening. And we were like, okay. And I just felt so frustrated cycle after cycle. Like, why is this not happening? And then I just had a day where I was like, you know what? I don't feel good. Why am I surprised I'm not conceiving when I don't feel good? I feel nauseous most of the time. I'm like sick a lot. Like I have had these weird headaches at night, especially. Like, why am I surprised that I'm not conceiving? And so from there, I was really like, right, what's the first thing we could do? The first thing I could do is go to the NAPRO doctors I was referring back and forth to all the time. But I didn't just want progesterone. Like I knew my cycle was off, but really why I didn't feel good was really weighing heavy on me. And what would happen if I continued not feeling good and got pregnant? And so I launched into my own health journey at that time. I spent a year trying to find like I worked with several different practitioners from different modalities and didn't really feel like there was anybody that I could tell to my clients, like, yes, go work with this person. I trust them implicitly. I could not find one person like that. And the one that I did was 7 hours away from my house. And I was like, okay, I have no resources for my people. And so, truly through God's grace and a whole host of things, that's why I decided to, or he showed me the time and way to do my NTP training. But it really is this like all-encompassing approach that we need to take. I did, by the way, go on to conceive baby number 5. And during her pregnancy was when the Lord was like, and now you're going to do the NTP. And I was like, okay, here we go.
It's
So she's
awesome how
almost,
he shows us things when
I
we're
know.
like, 8 months pregnant. It's like, okay, I guess we're doing this
Yes,
too.
we're gonna birth all the things. That's right. I know. So she is gonna be 5, and my Divine Mercy Nutritional Care will be 4 in about a month. So that's kind of fun. But anyway, so there is so much we can do to support your body. It's really a matter of figuring out what your body's telling us, diving deeper into that, and then listening to how we can support it from there.
Okay. So another question for you, talking about, supporting your hormones on a level of medication versus a level of diet and nutrition. So for those, we've been talking about naprotechnology. For the listeners that aren't familiar with that, I will put a link in the show notes. I've already made a note to do that so you guys can read about that more. But that is like the medical arm of the Creighton model of charting or fertility charting, right? So if somebody were trying to, let's say like they were trying to get pregnant, they were really struggling, that means that there's something, as you said, Rita, that means that there's something going on within your body that's telling you something's wrong. And so rather than bypassing that thing that's making you sick, we're trying to get to the root cause of what is making you sick. So naprotechnology would be the medical arm of, you would start to learn how to chart your cycle in this realm with the Creighton method. Then you would move on and work with a doctor that's trained in naprotechnology, which is short for natural procreative technology, where they would look at your chart and then deep dive into, okay, what are your hormones? What's going on with your hormones? Let's do some proper testing to get you an actual diagnosis to then treat you well from there. And without naprotechnology, I wouldn't have my kiddos either. So I am like truly in debt to it. And I'm like wholeheartedly about it. But it is true though that, so let's give low progesterone, for example. If you're showing signs of low progesterone, the protocol would be to have you start charting and then to supplement you with a bioidentical progesterone medication. So it's chemically the same type of progesterone as your body is creating. It's not the synthetic type of progesterone that you would see in the birth control pill. And then you would only be taking that medication in your post-ovulation phase, right? When progesterone would naturally be high. So that would be like the NAPRO protocol. As you know, Rita, I'm just telling this for our listeners, but I have friends who forever and ever are on progesterone in their post-ovulation phase, and they feel good, and it's helping their cycles regulate, and it's doing well for them. But there is a reality that, why is their body not producing that progesterone in the first place? So like going deeper to that. So Rita, my question is, what are the benefits of going deeper, of understanding, okay, why is my body not producing this progesterone in the first place? Just to give that example. And how do we start to support that on a natural level, assuming, it with diet or stress relief or what have you. So what would be the benefit of
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So there's definitely like a few things to think about there. Like the first, kind of running with the example of somebody that is on progesterone month after month, that might help them to feel well in their 20s and 30s, and to, make it, whatever it is that, the reason they started taking progesterone to begin with, right? Because usually, like, we might have low progesterone, but like never do anything about it. And that's usually somebody that like their charting doesn't look super concerning. They're they're not struggling to conceive or maintain pregnancy. So generally there's some type of symptom that we're going to the doctor with to start this process of being on progesterone support, right? So although it may make those things better, say that they're like experiencing some severe PMS and they've had several miscarriages. So it may make them able to no longer deal with those PMS symptoms and maintain pregnancies. But the reality is that, it is something that's foreign to our bodies. So we need to be sure that we're not making anything else worse. So if we ignore whatever the root cause is, and I'll kind of dive into some examples of what that could be in a minute. But if we just continue to be on progesterone support, then especially when you get into the perimenopause phase, which is really the 10 years before menopause, starts somewhere in the late 30s, into 40, but usually by late 30s, if somebody's presenting with some symptoms of things being off, I'm already starting to think perimenopause. And it's the 10 years before we stop cycling for a year or more. And so that time, that transitional time of our body remodeling from working under very high hormones to much lower hormonal output, is a really critical window of time in our body and in our overall health. And we need to be sure we're being supported appropriately for that as well. And so if we have kind of ignored things in the 20s and 30s, where I kind of like to think of that time as our body's just more forgiving in our 20s and 30s. Once we start to enter into perimenopause, we've really got to realize, oh, these things I've kind of ignored, I haven't really dealt with before. I need to start listening. I need to dive deeper, because I like to say that our body will talk nice to us only for so long, and then it will start to yell, and then we'll shut down, right? And usually along that continuum is advanced disease diagnoses, medications are needed, or other types of interventions. And so when our body's communicating to us, going back to the woman that starts taking progesterone because she has PMS and she's had several miscarriages, although you can, like I said, start progesterone support at that time, if we also dive deeper into, is there some type of mineral imbalance? Is there some type of digestive issue? Is there, something she's not getting through her diet because she's eating the standard American diet? Is she not metabolizing well these things that are necessary for, calming down the body, putting out fires? Is she chronically stressed? Is her blood sugar so dysregulated that it's a constant inflammatory process, but also something that's telling her body, you're not safe? And if we're not safe, our body's not thinking about doing the most amazing thing it can do, which is make and grow another person, right? That this is like amazing. We talk about pregnancy and, all of these things, just like they're so flippant, like, oh, of course, I'm going to have all the babies. Of course, I'm going to do this thing. It is such a miracle. It is such a miracle. And I think the more that we just stand in awe of that, the more we can see our body through this lens of like, oh, you just need something from me. You need some support. And that's what root cause medicine is seeking to do. It's seeking to learn to listen to the body in front of us and say, what is it you are showing us that you need? And it's looking at, things like our health history, even when we've had, our God bless them, our own mother, like her pregnancy with us, even if she had like whatever source it came from, a very high anxiety pregnancy, then our life is going to be patterned towards more stress, more anxiety. We're going to always our brain's always looking for like, wait, what am I worried about now? Because that high level of cortisol surging in our system is our normal. And when that's our normal, our body's not thinking about this beautiful, vulnerable state of being open to growing another human being. And I say this even if you're not trying to conceive, right? Even if you're a single woman and you start charting your cycles and you're like, I feel like crap. And you start charting and you're like, yeah, look at my chart. My practitioner said that it looks like I have all these markers that I need to listen to. Like, even then, we need to be sure our body feels safe enough that it can make enough of its own hormones, even if you're doing bioidentical at the same time. So this is why it's so critical that we dive deeper into how else can we support our body in this season.
Yeah, that is that is so important for sure. Okay, now I want to get into how do we actually do this? Because I mean, I also, I'm sure my listeners, if this is not your first podcast listening to this, you'll know I have PCOS, and that was like the whole, going through the NAPRO technology, learning Creighton in the first place, and seeking health through that. And it was diet that truly moved the needle for me. It was just eating healthier. And also too, I was going through all of this diagnosis and the healing journey while I was in college as a single woman. I'm super, super passionate about teaching single women this so that they can like get it figured out now. But anyhow, it was diet that really changed. And no college student wants to be told that. But it was. And when I got serious, like it was truly just eating healthier. And I didn't do anything specific, like not like a specific diet or anything. I just ate healthier. I just ate more fresh things. And that really moved the needle. So I've always been super interested in how diet affects our hormones, affects our fertility, so on and so forth. So Rita, when somebody comes to you and they're looking for that, that root cause of how they're not feeling good, maybe they have PMS, which is, a sign of that low progesterone, or maybe, I don't know, they're not feeling good. They come to you. What is one of the first things that you do? Do you do any testing to figure out their hormone balances? Do you do, I know you already said you kind of do a deep dive into like their stress level, how they are eating. You probably do a food journal, and things like that. But how do you get to a starting point where this becomes personalized for somebody?
Yeah, so I really like to start by having them. So I have them fill out like a 300 question questionnaire before our
Oh,
first
wow.
session. Yeah,
Yes.
and
Deep
then a big,
dive.
yes, and then a big general intake form. And then by talking to them, that really guides my recommendations. So I might say after that first, that 90-minute session, like, okay, now I want you to go get these labs ordered, or I really highly suggest these functional lab tests. But truthfully, I'm trying to do as much as I can through the symptoms they're presenting with, because these functional lab tests are really fun, but they're really expensive, right? And you're
They
paying
are.
for this all out of pocket. And so it's a matter of like, if we can move the needle for you without purchasing those tests, then let's start there. And so it really depends on what they're presenting with, and all of that. But I will say that usually there's some amount of like, okay, this is the best place we need to start, regardless of what you decide to do next. And let's see how much of an impact that makes for you. Right. For some people, it is PCOS is a great example to run with, but like for some people, just those dietary manipulations are so huge. And then there's other people that are like, I am eating so clean. I am, balancing all these other things. I'm doing all those things, and they're still not moving the needle. And so it really just depends on where they're at. But I would say that in general, it's really that like, you know, that's why I do it's actually hard for me. My dear friends that know me locally, they'll like see me and they'll be like, "Oh, Rita, I'm dealing with this one symptom." And I'm like, I can't like just run with that one symptom. Like my brain starts to immediately ask all these other questions that part of it are things that would be seen on the intake form that I can just breeze through real quick. And part of it is like, I need to really sit down with you and understand more about your history. And it's amazing how really having that deep dive does let you see into like everything about how they're eating, what they're eating, how they're processing stresses in their life, how they're talking about their health journey, how they're talking to themselves, what are the relationships in their life. Like you can really kind of see all of those things come out in this deep dive conversation. And that's what's so valuable to see like, oh, you know what? Actually, I think a huge piece of what's going on with you is the way you're talking to yourself, or the way you're looking at your fertility journey, or the way that you're, manipulating your food, or obviously if they're eating like standard American diet and going out to eat a lot, you're like, okay, this is easy. I kind of love that. I'm like, easy needle mover right here. You're definitely going to feel so much better if we just clean up what's going into your body. But it really is like those other conversations that kind of bring that out more.
Yeah, yeah. And let's kind of deep dive into that food category of things. So when somebody is coming to, and I recognize too that every woman is different. You're personalizing this for every woman, which I think is amazing because yeah, she gets that personalized idea of what her body is doing, how it's processing the things that she's eating, and how that's affecting how she feels, her hormones, all of the things. So, but if you could give some sort of generalized idea of, what should a woman be eating? Like what should we, as I mentioned earlier, right? You can go so deep into this. Like you can listen to all the podcasts and you can, read all the books about nutrition. But at the end of the day, like it is, especially if you're living in America, it is just not sustainable to, or at least I'm coming from me, right? Like it just, for me, it has not been sustainable to never eat that bag of chips, or never, like there is, moderation is there too. So can you kind of just shed a little light on that of what should we be eating? What should be like, what are absolute no-goes? What are things that are okay in moderation? Just kind of in a generalized idea of typically
Yeah.
what the kind of women that you work with.
Yeah, totally. I really come at food from like a real foods nourishing tradition kind of approach. So for those of you that aren't familiar, that's a lot of whole foods in their whole unadulterated form, right? So we're talking fruits and vegetables that are, hopefully just processed in our kitchen, but minimally processed otherwise. Lots of good quality meat sources, grass-fed beef, pasture-raised pork and poultry, grass-fed butter, farm fresh eggs, like that's the ideal, right? And so I like to think of this as like, sometimes our budget doesn't let us eat the ideal. Sometimes like our season in life doesn't let us eat the ideal. But if we can hit that for the vast majority of us, if we can hit that 80 to 90% of the time where we're eating really good quality foods, I would say like, I like to start as the like, okay, this is the ideal, wild caught fish and looking at your plate and really kind of breaking it down where you have like your fiber rich sources of veggies and you have your good quality protein and you have some carbohydrates. And those would be things like, leafy green salad, adding as many colors as you can for the mineral variety, however you like to prepare your meat. But again, like, cooking it at home, grilling it. I bought my husband a smoker for his birthday, and that was the best gift I ever got him. Like smoking your meats, right? Like just frying it in the pan with some good healthy oils. And then having like, potatoes or quinoa or rice or whatever for your carbohydrate starchy sources. And then saying like, okay, I can't quite afford that right now. All right, so let's just look at like, let's do some good quality whole meat sources, but maybe it's not always grass-fed beef, and we just say a prayer over it that the Lord will bless it anyway, right? Bless it to our bodies despite my budget not being able to allow that ideal. Obviously, like something like buying the whole animal. I have 6 kids and 2 teenagers. We go through so much food. So like I
I
get it.
imagine.
Yes, but we just buy a half a cow once a year. And when that starts to run low, we buy a pig once a year. And then when that starts to run low, like we just do the best that we can, right? So that's really the ideal. And then if you're nourishing your body so well with these high quality sources, then the other times I had my book club last night and I always get my favorite brand of kettle potato chips. They're just so crunchy and yummy and salty. Like I always get those for my book club. Like, like just having that balance of like, this is okay, right? Like if my husband and I are going to go out on a date, like for my body, I know that I need to eat gluten-free, dairy-free, and no sugar. Like those are my absolute musts, or I feel like garbage the next day. But that's not for everybody. Other people are like, oh, I can go out and I can eat pizza and I might feel like garbage that night, but the next day I'm okay. I'm like, okay, good. I mean, if you can know that that's what's bothering your body and then choose that, I think it's a much different conversation. that we're having, as opposed to I feel like crap all the time and I have no idea where that's coming from, right? Or what's causing it. And so that's where that like 80, 20, 85, 15, depending on your body and your season and your goals, that's where that balance really comes in. Now, some non-negotiables I would say would be things like, trans fats. So like bad quality oils, having like canola oil, margarine, that kind of stuff in your kitchen. I would definitely, like, if we're eating the vast majority of our meals in our kitchen, just do the best to have the best quality ingredients you can afford. So having, like olive oil, using butter, using, I'm not opposed to using bacon grease, using lard, tallow. So these like natural occurring healthy fats that are really going to nourish our bodies. Another non-negotiable I would say is anything that is sold as low fat. So like dairy products, if they're low fat dairy products, they're going to have so many more ingredients. So much more processing goes into that, extracting the fat and then adding things in so it has flavor, because fat gives it flavor. Even if you're listening to this and you're like, I really need to lose weight and my doctor told me to eat low fat, I would tell you, don't eat low fat, get the whole fat version and maybe just reduce the portion size, but don't cut out fat, because that's going to be bad for your body as well. So we just want to be sure we're giving it good quality fats. And really, I just realized that all has to do with fats. But that is a really big piece. And I think that's a really big lie that we're still peeling back for, that our American culture especially has been bought and sold on in the 80s particularly, and it really was strong in the 90s. But this like, eat fat, get fat thing that we've been sold, and it's just such a lie. It's really important for our bodies to have good healthy fats. And yes, there may be times that we cut back on that a little bit, but we should never eliminate healthy fats. So that's what I would say would definitely be like a non-negotiable. Never do that. But then if occasionally, you're going out to eat or eating something processed and packaged, like just keep it in moderation and know what are your non-negotiables.
Okay. Yeah, the full fat is something that I learned probably in the last few years. And you're right, it is such a shift from even 10, 15, 20 years ago, what we understood about health. And you'll still hear doctors saying like eat a low fat diet. And it's like, no, the more low fat it is, the more processed it is, the more fake ingredients it's going to have in it. And so like I think, at least for me, I found that the easiest ways to do that are like milk. We go through milk just as if my kids drink milk all the time. I always get full fat milk. Always, always, always. And yeah, and it's just like, just have lower portions of it, right? But if you're concerned about weight, but yeah, and then yogurt, another thing, cheese, another thing. Just, if I go to Kroger and I always get the full fat cheese and I always get the full fat milk, right? So I think that's something so easy that we can do. That's a really tangible one. Earlier you said that your diet specifically is no dairy, no gluten, no sugar. How do you make that sustainable? Especially, I really want, it's like, talk about all the three of those things, but specifically sugar, because sugar is so inflammatory. And especially coming from somebody who has PCOS, like one of the things that I did when I switched my diet was I really, really lowered my intake of sugar, which was helpful, very helpful. And that's where I saw the needle turn. But it can be really, really hard. You're talking about the, typical American diet. There's sugar in everything. So kind of talk about, how do you make that sustainable for somebody, just for the sake of like lowering inflammation, especially?
Yeah, so I have multiple autoimmune conditions, and I also have PCOS. So it is something for me personally. It is such a non-negotiable, because if I eat sugar, I like, basically I like, my whole mouth gets like full of canker sores. It is like, that's not worth it, especially for somebody that talks
Yes.
so much. Like, I'm a very social
Yeah.
person, but also like talk for my job all the time. So it's really about, in our household, we just make a lot of things from scratch, and we'll use honey or maple syrup or we'll just sweeten things less. So there are things that will have, like I almost always have ketchup in my fridge, right? But I personally don't eat it. So if I'm going to eat something that's like, I want the ketchup flavor, I might use like the Primal Kitchens has a ketchup that doesn't have sugar in it. Crazy expensive. But as long as my people don't realize that it tastes better than the ketchup bottle they're eating, it's usually okay. That being said, like 9 times out of 10, I just go without. I'd rather just do mustard and sauerkraut instead of ketchup on whatever I would want ketchup with, right? Or mayonnaise, maybe it's some type of garlic aioli, that kind of thing. So it is more expensive, but it's such a needle mover for me that it's not ever worth it. And so it does boil down to, like, if we're going to have salad dressings, yeah, I almost never have store-bought salad dressings, but we always have olive oil, and I love those infused balsamic vinegars. So that's always an option for something like salads, or I'll just whip up a salad dressing and it lasts, right? Even just the homemade salad dressing, it will last a week, 2 weeks in my fridge. And that's easy. That's just a one-time thing. I have 2 extra minutes in the kitchen. I'm going to whip up a salad dressing, and then we have an option as we go forward. So things like that. And I don't want you to think that I have all this time in the kitchen. I truly don't. Actually, I was just reflecting with my 15-year-old daughter how this last week, my 12-year-old daughter made dinner one night. My 15-year-old made dinner one night. I cooked dinner one night when my husband was taking all the kids to a thing they had at dinner time. And then the next night, my husband made dinner. And actually, he made dinner 2 nights in a row. I just realized, because I had to run to the store last night when it was time to prepare dinner. But I was just like, this is how you make it sustainable. You have multiple helpers, especially when you're cooking for an army. It helps to have that shared camaraderie in, like, okay, let's all do this together. And that's when I'm able to, like, just jump in the kitchen, make up a salad dressing real quick, and all right, we're sitting down at the table. But even when they're cooking instead of me, again, it's not this long drawn out ordeal. It's very much like, on the weeknights, we have 25-30 minutes and let's get dinner on the table. And so it is just leaning on these whole food sources. Can we roast it and pop it in the oven and leave it until a little bit later? How can we shortcut our time in the kitchen? That's a big piece.
Yeah, yeah. Having the help. I mean, that is huge. And two, when you're starting something new with anything, but let alone when you're starting a new diet, having somebody doing it with you or having somebody just there to support you, that's essential. Like when I was, kind of changing my diet, working on my PCOS, that was right around the same time I met my husband, and he grew up in a household that just eats really healthy. And so he was like, yeah, let's do this. And so I had his support, which was, that was 100% necessary to be able to actually make that sustainable. Okay. So with the sugar, you said, okay, you'll still use honey, you'll still use maple syrup. Okay. When I heard no sugar, I also heard like no honey, no maple syrup, no fruits. Like, can you kind of dive into the difference between maybe not using like the white sugar, or even if it's like an organic sugar, I don't know, those types of sugar versus the more natural forms? What is the difference between that? And do the natural forms of sugar still cause that inflammation that we're trying to get rid of?
Great question. So it really depends on what is the problem. And this is why it's so bio-individual, right? Because if for someone it's blood sugar dysregulation, that's like their real big problem. They have insulin resistance, they're pre-diabetic, that's the big thing. Then even those natural sweeteners are going to be slightly problematic, right? Depending on how we're using them. So in that case, even just a piece of fruit by itself could be spiking blood sugar levels. And so that's something we'd want to support and walk them through. For me personally, cane sugar, I react to. It's specifically cane sugar. And so I can use other natural sweeteners. Now, I will say that something like high fructose corn syrup, like I tend to avoid anyway, just because it's often found in highly processed things. and I get an immediate headache. I'm like, nope, not worth it. And again, part of the PCOS piece as well is that I do have dysregulated blood sugar levels. And so I do know that I need to eat in a way that's supportive of that. And so it's really about like, okay, how can we support my body through this? So, natural sugars, cane sugar does actually grow in the ground, right? But then it's processed in such a way that it's bleached, and it becomes very inflammatory in our body because of what's found in it, but also the way that it is metabolized in our body, by causing that blood sugar spike, which is causing inflammation, and it is telling our body you're not safe in a whole host of other ways. And so that's kind of where we just need to figure out, like, what is your body saying? How can we support it through this? And then how can we do those things in balance? So definitely when there's, holidays are going to be here before we know it. We will definitely have our fair share of, sweetened fruits with, honey maple syrup, desserts, and all of those things. But also when we're eating them at the end of a meal versus on an empty stomach, or if you go for a walk after eating something that is higher in sugars, that's going to help to balance those blood sugar spikes and also reduce that inflammatory load that your body takes from eating them. So I hope that answers your question. I know it's kind of complicated to unpack.
No, yeah, it does. And I think the fact of the processing really plays a huge role in it, because like the white sugar that you're going to get from your generic store is going to be a lot different than, like, we always get the maple syrup that from Costco, and it's like the organic maple syrup, and that's how I sweeten my coffee. Like, I always put actually I start with a cup of black coffee, and then I'll go to like my fancy sugar coffee, but I put maple syrup in it, and half and half, and it's great. It tastes so good. And so that's something that I've learned to just a easy swap, just like a dash of the maple syrup, and it's great. Rita, can you give our listeners, just to make this even more tangible, can you give our listeners just your typical breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Like, what is on your plate and how do you prepare it? Just walk us through that, just to make it so
Yeah.
tangible.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so usually breakfast, I kind of try to have like 3 or 4 things that I rotate between, so that it helps for diversity for my gut, for my microbiome. But I'll just walk you through like one of those instances. But so like one day I might have 3 eggs for breakfast, and today I had some avocado. If I have fresh tomato in the kitchen, I really like that with my eggs. And occasionally I'll buy these. There are these gluten-free bagel thins that have no sugar, and they're really good. And it's just fun to have a little bit of carb with my eggs. And then for lunch, probably one of my favorite lunches is, I know this is going to sound weird, but it's sardine salad. So one thing I didn't mention, my husband and I like to travel a lot, and we traveled a lot with the kids. And so we have Portugal, they love their sardines, and we love Portugal and Portuguese cuisine. So we will do like a canned sardine salad that's kind of like a tuna salad. So we'll just like the sardines, and then dice like some radishes and red onion and whatever veggies I have in the fridge, maybe celery, maybe cucumber. And truthfully, to make this so easy, because in the middle of the day, I'm like transitioning from homeschooling to work, I might just grab like some, when you make a salad and all the stuff falls to the bottom of the bowl, I might just like grab some of that from our leftover salad and throw it in my sardines, and then use some avocado mayo that I get from Costco that doesn't have any sugar too. And I'll eat that with tortilla chips. And then usually in the afternoon, I'll need a snack, especially right now. I'm breastfeeding a very fat 10-month-old baby. And so I'm always starving. So I'll eat like some cashews and dates, or, a handful of pecans and a banana, something like that. And then for dinner, we usually have like some type of vegetable and a meat. So let's see. Yesterday was Friday, so that's not a good example. We try to do meat-free Fridays, but Thursday we had pork chops and roasted broccoli and a salad. So, something like that, that will do. And then if I need another snack in the evening, I might grab again for some more nuts. I tend not to need an evening snack, which is which is great. But I tend to be hungrier earlier in the day. So that's kind of a typical day for me, but I do try to like rotate through those meals as well.
Okay. And you said that you have like four kind of breakfasts that you rotate through. Can you tell
Yeah.
us the other three? Because
Yeah.
breakfast is the hardest one for me. Me personally, I am not good in the kitchen. I've learned how to be good enough in the kitchen for the sake of feeding my family, but I don't like being in the kitchen. It's just not my favorite thing. And so first thing in the morning when I'm still waking up, I'm like throwing granola bars at the kids and saying fetch. Like that is breakfast. And I really want to get away from that because it's not, and then I eat it too, and it's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for them. We feel kind of icky. And yeah, so can you give us your other options too? And if
Yeah.
you have any like easy go-to options, that would be so helpful,
Yeah, for
at least for
sure.
me.
So I really like I will do oats in the morning. I will just always pack it with a lot of protein. So we'll put a couple scoops of gelatin in our oats as I'm starting to cook it. I'll like whisk the oats with the gelatin and then add them to the water at the same time. So that I know otherwise if we just eat oats in the morning, everyone's blood sugar is going to be spiked and then everyone's going to be crabby about an hour later, which is when we're sitting down to do math. Not advisable. So we'll do like oatmeal parfait kind of where we'll have like, some people add peanut butter, some people actually add yogurt. Some of my dairy eaters will add yogurt. So kind of mix and match that way. And then cinnamon and nuts and maple syrup. Another one of my favorites is chia seed pudding. Again, I'm usually adding some type of like protein powder to it as well. But that's an easy one to like prepare the night before and just have it grab out in the morning. So since moving to Cincinnati 8 years ago, another one of my favorites is Geta. So if you're not familiar with Cincinnati, you've probably never heard of Geta. But it's basically steel cut oats cooked in broth for hours. And then you add ground beef and ground pork to it. And then you put it in loaf pans and you slice it and fry it. And so Geta is a really easy one for us to incorporate in the mornings. And then it's a good quality protein. And I can make it once and I'll make like 3 loaves and it lasts for quite a while. Or I'll do like the sausage links from Costco. I can't eat those because those have sugar in them. But my kids will eat those. And then I'll make sausage patties for myself. And then I really like to do that with like avocado, tomato, and sauerkraut. So that's another one of my favorites. That's the top of my list. Smoothie is another one. We'll do a good bit where we'll pack it with a bunch of greens and protein powder. And then we'll do like, different, whatever frozen fruits we have on hand.
Yeah. What kind of protein powder do you use?
So this is again, my people use the blue Orgain from Costco. There's just something protein powders, I would say more than anything else, I feel like are like just funny on different tummies. So that used to be okay for me. It's not anymore. So now I tend to use like either egg white or a beef gelatin, like bovine uh, protein powder. So
Okay. Yeah, because I asked just because there are so many different kinds, and then you'll
yeah,
hear this one's bad, this one's good, and then you'll hear the
I
opposite.
know.
So yeah, just out of
Yes.
curiosity. Well, Rita, we're towards the end of our time right now, but I've so been enjoying this conversation. Do you have anything else for our listeners? Like any more tips, any more advice, just anything else that you'd want to tell our listeners about your work and what you do and how they can be healthy?
Yeah, I always want people to like, I know it's hard making changes. At the beginning, I like when you mentioned that about having your husband help you when you were making your dietary changes, like the beginning's the hardest. The first 2 weeks are always the hardest. But I just want you to constantly live in this place of like, I am just learning to understand my body, because I believe that's a lifelong pursuit. But when we come from this place of curiosity, when we come from this place of like, I just haven't found the thing yet, it leaves us it lets us live this hopeful existence of like there is a solution, there is an answer, this isn't something I'm always going to deal with, and it makes it less heavy. And I think that's really important. Any health journey, any health struggle, just to remember like, first of all, the Lord's not done with me yet. I'm still here. There's something He's calling me to, and He has given me the ability to live my life to its full so that I can achieve those things. And so coming at a health journey with that from that place of hope changes things, and it lets us be more open to seeing, you know what, maybe I can try this dietary change. The one other thing I want to say too is that if you've done it, if you've made the dietary changes and maybe you felt better for a little while and then you no longer feel good, that tells me that you need more than just dietary manipulation, that you need some of that deeper solution, whether it's doing some deep gut healing work or something else. Like, it doesn't mean that no longer is helpful. And it's an easy place I see people a lot of times backsliding into, like, well, if I'm going to feel like this, I'm just going to eat a burger and fries because I keep driving by it anyway and it sounds good right now. But just knowing that that's not the end of the road. There's so much more that can be done.
Okay. Well, if our listeners want to get connected with you and work with you, where are you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I have healthandhormones.org is my website, and my podcast is parked there as well, where I honestly just have a lot of short podcast episodes where I'm answering questions that I hear all the time, or things that I want to get on a soapbox about. So you can find me there. I know you can find me there, and I also have a Balancing Hormones Naturally ebook that I'd love to share. So I'll send you that, and
Awesome.
We can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that for our listeners. Rita, thank you so much for our conversation. This is so great. I learned so much from you, and thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
Thanks for listening to the Truth and Fertility podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please leave a 5-star review. That helps me tremendously. For more information about learning to chart your fertility cycle, you can visit truthandfertility.com, and I'll talk to you guys again next week.